Hey everybody, it's Robert Dunt from ArtTop10.com at Graham Crowley's summer exhibition, Silent Disco, and I'm very happy to be chatting with Josh Thomson. Josh.
Hello.
Hey Josh, so tell me about this mad drawing.
Okay. The chap in the drawing is George Melly, the jazz singer, art collector, critic, raconteur, general personality. And in this particular drawing, he's, I think, about 22, 23 years old. It's very, very early 1950s. It's in a nightclub in Leeds called Studio 20. And as you can see on the wall, Gallery of Fame for Uninhibited Idealists. And this is part of a much larger body of preparatory work that I'm doing for a research project at Glasgow University, which is about the contribution of Commonwealth jazz musicians to British music and British jazz between 1948, so immediately after the Second World War, and 1968. And the reason that I'd included this in the exhibition was just simply that I thought the symmetry of circumstance was really nice, that perhaps this exhibition is a gallery of fame for uninhibited idealists.
Oh yeah.
I haven't met you guys, but I'm hoping that's the case. But also thinking about the different waves of British jazz in Britain from the post-war periods. After the First World War, obviously there was also the Spanish flu, so that was after a period of huge strife, and there was this sort of burgeoning new culture in the 20s. After the 50s, after the Second World War, the 50s and the 60s provoked huge cultural change, what with mass migration, bringing cultural practitioners from the Caribbean, from India, from Australia. So, you know, what I'm kind of getting at is how Britain has always been a magnet for exceptional cultural practice. And that perhaps we're going to see a kinder, more idealistic time. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, but you know,
but we can dream.
Be idealistic about it.
Yeah, no, it's cool. So tell me just about the draw. Why pencil, and why? What kind of pencil are you using? It looks like it's taken a while to produce this, even this little one.
Oh, it's just normal pencils. It's just normal pencil on paper, and I think the reason that particularly for preparatory work, that process of looking and considering the subject, I think pencil is particularly well suited for that. The kind of circuit between the image, the eye, and the hand, and the whole way you're kind of mulling about the relationships between all of these figures that I'm looking at. So I'm looking at, as I say, the musicians, white jazz musicians in Britain, but also black Caribbean musicians who've come from, say, Trinidad and Tobago, from India, from South Africa, and just trying to place all these particular characters, saying it's like on a stage. Really? So it's like a sort of trying to gauge my relationship with.
So in a way, almost as you're drawing, you're thinking about these things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, part of the research that I'm doing is how art practice and how map making, which this is part of the map making process, can be a research tool, and a lot of the consideration, a lot of the actual. The meat of the research can happen while I'm drawing. Like thinking about the connections and thinking about the way things mesh.
So that's quite interesting. So the drawing literally sort of sets your brain into that ability to make these weird or discover these connections that are there but not seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what happens is you can render quite difficult conceptual relationships physical, and you can point to them in a gesture that would take you pages of writing to historically place the two together.
That's beautiful. So which sort of thing were you getting at in this one? Which sort of, is there a particular
era?
Or a particular era, particular comment, or particular communicate?
It's the idea of the idealism after what was culturally a terrible moment. And also, I think we were talking before this about how we consider, say, trad jazz, early jazz in Britain as being woefully unhip and kind of a bit boring, really. But at the moment that trad jazz emerged, it was the beginning of the rocker movement. You know, so you had the modern jazz makers who were the mods like Tubby Hayes and Johnny Danquith, and then you had the trad guys like George Melly, and they were a wild bunch. Yeah. They were really.
Go on, tell me the wild things they were doing.
Do you know, I don't want to, but I think it's fair to say that they were prototypical punks. They were. Like in the case of George Melly, he was openly bisexual at a time when, you know, it carried a heavy legal penalty. He was a surrealist. He was a public, I would say, a public naturist. And he just felt the normal rules of society didn't necessarily need to apply to him.
That's actually really cool, because now the drawing actually does communicate all that.
There's a swagger about him. There's that kind of, you know, cigarette in the corner of the mouth, the hand on the hip, like a Regency dandy.
Yeah, the cigarette in the corner of the mouth is really weird.
Yeah, it's impossible to draw. I don't think I quite got it.
So, when you saw that image, did you think, damn, that's the one I want to draw, it's perfect?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's partly because of the poor quality of the photography of that particular era, because there weren't too many photographers in the clubs documenting the margins. So modern jazz, early trad jazz just isn't documented terribly well. And particularly if we're talking about, say, Caribbean, South African or Indian jazz, you very, very seldom see those communities' music reviewed in magazines. You don't see photographs of them, so except people like Joe Harriott, who you may have heard of, but one of his frequent collaborators, Matilda da Silva, the Indian guitarist, you would very, very seldom see photos of him or hear mention of his music, despite it being some of the best music recorded in Britain in the 60s.
That's insane, isn't it? Yeah. And so this is quite a small drawing for you, because normally they're what? Massive 3, or was it a massive 3-metre one that took 3 years? Was
it was 3.5 metres by 2.5 metres, 12 panels showing. It was a kind of anecdotal history of the migration of music from the earliest days of music notation, which was roughly 1,000 years ago, all the way up to music in space and music technology. So, that's another project that I think I may have told you about, where I'd sent a record into space, which back in 2012 I'd launched a digitized version of a vinyl record into space, and it went up to the International Space Station. That's the one.
How did you launch it into space?
Well, I managed to find a educational company that was making these nanosatellites, which are about the size of a little Rubik's cube. Yeah. And once they're up into space, you have these programs that on the little Arduino circuit, and you can get them to do really rudimentary experiments. So you can send out a beam of light, or you can test the temperature or what have you, and schools can use them. So essentially, for the cost, a tiny pittance of a cost, you can have students all over the world having access to space.
That is absolutely mad. I didn't know that. That is so cool. Why don't more people do it?
I don't know. So I do know. I contacted the guys who built the prototype and asked them if they would send it up on a chip. And seeing as it was such a small piece of data, they'd be like, absolutely, this is good press. Subsequently, the American military bought the company.
Oh my goodness me! Check it out.
But there you go.
That is so cool. And so you also made records as well, haven't you? And I think you had a record.
Yeah, I had a small vinyl-only record label which I ran out of Hong Kong up until about 3 years ago, and that was specifically focused on experimental music, and music with a very strong sense of narrative. And so the first record that I released was the record I was telling you about, Platinum Meters, which was a reworking of NASA's Golden Record. And then there was a group who all played single-string skis.
Oh,
So they're called the Skiadelics.
Skiadelics.
Yeah, and they were all students of Alvin Lucier. So this was like a kind of modernist take, a kind of surf ski thing.
Very cool.
And then there was a record by a British chap who'd made a piece of music every year for his son. We released that when his son turned, I think, 15. So it's a kind of history of electronic amateur bedroom music.
Fantastic.
And then the last one was a Chinese artist, and he'd recorded the sound of a ship being built from the inside, from the point of view of the boat. So the boat was all mic'd up, and over two sides you get to hear the story of this ship being built and then launched.
Man, that is so cool. I love all those things. All sound brilliant. I love it. It is an uninhibited idealist kind of vibe throughout.
Yeah, I hope so.
Bomba